So jumping right in, because it's always a challenge to follow the Queen, you will agree with me, right? And I also want to add my deep thanks to all of you who chose to be here this afternoon, and particularly to Ariana, just because Ariana is the person who is almost single-handedly responsible for putting this panel together. And I have to tell you that Queen Quet and I frequently meet across the country. In fact, last week we were on Capitol Hill together, lobbying on behalf of the exclusion of that segment of the FY 2011 funding bill that says no more money should be spent on LAP programs in the Southeast and in the Gulf, which is a very big thing that I believe that NOAA has been working on, as well as multiple environmental organizations. And the reception that we got on Capitol Hill was so fabulous, but that's down the road. I recognize that this is intended to be a conversation, and since we're running very short in time, I'm just going to give you a couple of big themes or things that I've noticed. I've been working in the environmental segment for the past 15 years as a self-starter. My husband and I started, Frank and I started our environmental consulting company in 1995 after taking a life-altering trip around the country, driving from Florida all the way to Acadia, all the way across the country, Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Yosemite, all the way to Olympic and back, doing this incredible tour of these what I thought were just phenomenally beautiful places, but I since came to recognize were something, were part of something called the national park system. I mean, I had a college education, and I did not know that there was a national park system in America. But having experienced such wondrous beauty, and having noticed that there was a paucity of Americans of color, there were no black people, no Latinos, no Asians, no Native Americans, among the hundreds of thousands of people that we saw, we recognized we wanted to do something to change that. So. And we found also, we recognized also that the problem was a lack of information coming into our communities about these places. Now, fast forward 15 years later, and the same is still true because I believe that many of the agencies that are represented here today and that are putting on this conference include NOAA, the Department of Interior, EPA, etc. And having gone to multiple conferences and speaking at multiple conferences around the country for these many years, I noticed one very, very striking demographic, and that is the participants are almost all exclusively white. And that seemed to be taken for granted, like, oh, this is just the way it is, this is the way it's always been, and this is the way it will continue to be. Well, I say, if you are the leader of something, of people that look just like you and are just like you, then really, you should call yourself part of a clique and not so much part of a leadership entity. And these major government agencies, which are at the forefront of environmental protection, are doing the whole country and perhaps even the whole world such a disservice by not reaching out and engaging the segment of the population that is the fastest growing. The census in 2000 projected that by 2050 we'll be 50-50. The plurality of African Americans, Latinos, Asians, Native Americans will make up a full 50% of the population. So I'm like, who are these people talking about sustainability, etc., when they're not engaged in the growing population? And it's not only because the Brundtland Commission of 1974, which came up with the description of sustainability, said vital to any sustainability effort is you must help the people that are at the lowest end of the socio-economic spectrum, otherwise nothing that you do can last. So I'm like, who didn't get the message? And why aren't we not doing so much more about it? There's a certain complacency about that that really drives me nuts. I really have to hold myself in check because we cannot, even if the white population of America, every single person was devoting themselves every day to protecting the environment, the coastal zone, the parks, the forests, etc., it would be undone by the other 50% that don't know what you're doing and don't care and that's not involved. How is that not obvious to everybody? So when I thought about my presentation to you today, I thought, who is not at the table? Who is overlooked? Who is not seen? Who is not in the picture? And very often, that is America's vast, fast-growing populations of people of color. I mentioned earlier that I've had the luxury of working with Queen Quet since 1997, I think, when we first met. So we've been on the circuit for a long time, pretty much saying the same thing. And one thing that I've become more convinced of over the last 2 years or so, as I have experienced the Gullah Geechee people, is that they represent almost a microcosm. All the stuff, when I looked at the agenda of what you're trying to accomplish, the conference themes and focus areas, planning for resilient coastal, Great Lakes and ecosystems, healthy habitats, healthy coastal and Great Lakes communities, climate modeling, etc., focus areas, government and policy, implementation, measuring success, outreach and engagement. All of those very complex things that you're looking at can be reduced and worked out in the Gullah Geechee culture. So it's almost as if you could have a microcosm of this whole national thing that you're trying to do and work it out on a small scale and then see how it works, and then you could extrapolate it to the rest of the country. So that is what I wanted to posit to you today. The Gullah Geechee culture is unique in so many ways, in that they inhabit a discrete portion of the country. They are in the coastal barrier islands off of the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. And these people are the descendants of the Africans that were brought to those coastal islands 300, 400 years ago. They have lived harmoniously on that land, almost untouched by the mainstream culture on the mainland, because they did not have bridges to those islands until the 1950s? 1940s, okay. So they evolved a culture that is a unique gem of the African culture and the African influence in America. And when I say they're unique, I am not just taking that out of my hat, because the federal government recognized them as a special cultural heritage area and included the Gullah Geechee, created the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor as part of the National Park System in 2004, right? 2006. And Queen Quet was a leading figure in getting that done. This woman makes the federal government move and create something. So I'm telling you, we're not talking about a small person here, okay? We're talking about somebody with really big influence on a nationwide and international scale. And I'm emphasizing that because, you know, when I looked at your website, I saw this, I clicked on this link that talked about, you know, how you're moving forward. And you said, on June 21 to 23, the National Ocean Council brought together over 500 federal, state, tribal, and local government representatives, etc., from Gulfport to Anchorage, and from Pago Pago to Portland, to kick off efforts for regional collaboration to advance the stewardship of our oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes. And I'm like, hey, was the Gullah Geechee people up in there? No, they weren't up in there? Well, that's a missed opportunity. Why is it a missed opportunity? Because these people have been living sustainably from the land and waters for 350 years. So before there was agency, leadership and management and benthic ecology and all of that, they were living that tradition. And in my experience with the Gullah Geechee people, I have found that there is something very unique and amazing that they bring to the fore, and that is the component of opening the heart. I've been to so many scientific meetings where people like taught the science, and we all have a nice conversation and then we go home. But there has been no change of heart. Very recently, well, in April I believe it was, Queen Quet had a conference about the Gullah Geechee people up at the University of North Florida in Jacksonville. It was sponsored by their anthropology department. And the professor who was head of that department, actually arranged to have some young people go over and spend some time with the Gullah Geechee people as part of their research. They were over there for 4 days. She told us, and some of the young people told us, that when they got back on the bus to come back to the school, they were in tears, they were crying. They said it was the most transformational event that had ever happened to them. Because they said they went into this community where they didn't know anybody, and the people embraced them and told them, we love you. They were like, You love us, you don't even know us. Our parents, our families don't tell us that they love us. And they said the impact of how do you say, embracing those people who are totally broke down all the supposed cultural, economic, racial, blah, blah, blah barriers. So, on the one hand, I want to go into I would love to go into great detail and talk about how all of the things that you plan, that this conference is about, could be focused locally and, locally, microcosm, on the Gullah Geechee people, because they are right now trying to establish their fisheries, trying to determine what their rights are. They have been so pushed off of the waters by the big trawler things and all the rules and regulations that these people who have fished for 350 years sustainably now hardly even go fishing. There's one guy that has one big boat that's still operating commercially. His engine blew the other day for $10,000. He might be off the water for however long. And we're talking millions of dollars of money to do coastal and fishermen and etc., etc. But these people who are the real deal are like totally out of the mainstream. The other big things I want to point out to you, apart from the big demographic shift that's en route, is the big demographic shift. Yes, more than 70% of African Americans in the country live within 50 miles of the coast. So these people are in very dire risk of the effects of sea level rise and climate change. I mean, it's going to be barreling down on them with the force of Hurricane Katrina. And the Congressional Black Caucus, in their climate change report of 2004, expressed very deep concern that climate change is going to affect African American populations and low-income populations more than any other population in the country. So my point is this: where is the public information campaign then that NO is doing, or DOI is doing, or all of these people who are working in coastal areas, who are about sustainability, who are about people? Where is the public information campaign? Where is the public involvement campaign? And I submit to you that part of the reason that that is not going on is because people do not perceive of people of color as having a stake in the environment or having any interest. You would be amazed at how many people, I'm not going to say white people, but you can extrapolate, have said to me, oh, those people are interested in the environment. I'm like, I'm one of those people, thank you very much, and I'm very interested, and I've probably done as much, if not more than you, to raise awareness among other people. You know, and how do we get those people involved? Well, if you did something, maybe, you know, something would change. But I find that so many people are so wedded to that position of, oh, it's so hard. Show me what you've done. Oh, nothing? Well, why did you expect something to change? Duh. So, what's the time thing? I know we don't have much time, but I wanted to, Frank and I really focus on the legacy of African Americans on the land, particularly in the public land system. Because again, this is another untold story of how much African Americans have contributed to the national park system, the public land system, how many groups are out there right now teaching young people to scuba dive, developing young marine biologists of color, you know, really working very hard with precious little resources to bring people up to a level where they can participate and be involved in the public treasures which belong to all Americans. It's all our tax dollars that finance all of this stuff, and yet we are so marginalized and excluded. And I say to you, everybody in this room as part of this conference, everybody that's here, has agency, has power. And my greatest desire and hope and wish and charge to you is that you use whatever nugget of learning or awakening or something new that you learn from this segment, that there are thousands of people involved, thousands of people working at the grassroots level, but that so much more needs to be done. I hope that you will carry that forth and do something with it in all the areas that you can.